As David and I shared a gentle kiss, the garden erupted into applause with joyous laughter ringing out beneath the afternoon sun. The moment felt timeless. It was going to be a memory that I knew would live in my heart forever. After the introductions, congratulations, and well wishes, my husband and I walked hand in hand toward the table where Grams had placed her legendary lemon cake, which I specifically asked for, and everyone found their seats. Stories were shared, hugs exchanged, and the air was filled with music and joy. David squeezed my hand, and I realized that this simple, beautiful day was exactly what we had dreamed of. Our future stretched out before us, bright and full of promise, and I couldn't wait to see where love would lead us next. While David got us more of the delicious food, I went for tea. I stood behind my dad's sister, who said she was certainly beautiful, and so was today. Does she know the truth yet? Grams, my mom's mother, sighed hard. No, and I don't think she should ever know. Aunt Penny, mom's sister, who is only a year younger than my mother, snarled. Yes, she should, mama. She has a right to know exactly what that man did to her mother. She's 26 now. Why are we still hiding the truth from her? Ollie Janine Colware would want her told. They were obviously talking about me. I moved forward and loudly demanded, what should I know? I focused on Grams. Told me what? All three women stared at me with wide eyes, and I instantly knew this was not going to be good. My dear, Grams sighed. We were discussing when you had chickenpox and hoping it won't affect your fertility. Aunt Penny rolled her eyes, and Aunt Leanna, dad's sister, quickly moved over to her mother, Grandma Shannon, who I was named after. They started arguing in hushed tones, and it only made me more determined to find out what was going on. Grams, I cannot believe you'd lie. Now tell me the truth. What did Dad do to Mom? Grams' eyes welled, and she whispered, I can't. I can, Aunt Penny shouted. I've been waiting for ages to tell you what happened to my beautiful sister, Penelyn Diane Cole Healy. I jumped at Grams' shout. Yes, Daddy, Penny whispered. Why would you dampen your niece's wedding day? Couldn't this have waited until they were settled or later on in their marriage? Those events were held back for 18 years. Couldn't it wait another year? Why today? Dad, Uncle Matt called. We've been holding it in all that time at your and Mom's insistence that you weren't ready and that it would only hurt Shannon. She now has a husband, and he's just promised to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and health, until death do they part. It's time. I looked at David and realized he didn't know either. My husband quickly moved to my side, wrapped an arm around my waist, and gave me a gentle kiss on my temple. I relaxed, but not enough to forget what my grandmother and aunts were discussing. Tell me, I begged. I heard no, don't. I turned. My grandmother Shannon, whom I called Grammy, was rocking in her chair crying. I rushed to her, and when I dropped to my knees in front of her, she bear hugged me and begged the others not to say anything because she didn't want to lose me. Why would I ever leave your life, Grammy? Please, I need to know. Uncle Harry gripped my bicep and lifted me when Grammy finally released me. He held it while escorting me to a table and gestured for me to sit. Once I did, David sat next to me. I watched him until he settled, then turned to my uncle. Dear one, he started, and shook his head. Shannon, dear, of my parents' 5 children, your mother was the only one allergic to peanuts. Mama discovered it when she was an infant. Grams wept as she said I was pregnant with Penelyn and took my little Ollie to the store with me to get items for dinner. My brother owned that store and kept her in his office with his 2 daughters while I looked around. Theo gave them all a piece of peanut-filled candy. I was grabbing some potatoes when he shouted for me over the intercom to come to his office right away, and I dropped everything and ran. I burst in, and he was on the phone frantically calling for an ambulance while my baby was swollen red and gasping to breathe. From that moment on, Gramps cried. We never allowed anything near us that was close to a peanut. My baby girl suffered during that attack, and none of us wanted to go through that again. It was beyond traumatizing. I nodded understanding and said, go on. Uncle Harry squeezed my hand. When Randall Ware met Ollie, he was told of the allergy and agreed that he would keep peanuts away from her, and as far as we knew, he did so until... Heart pounding, I blinked and demanded, until when, Uncle? Harry swallowed hard. Until that afternoon, he brought home soup with boiled peanuts in it and gave it to your mother. I blinked again and gasped. He gave her the soup that killed her? On purpose? Yes, Penny snapped. But why? I wept. Why? They He loved her. I turned to Grandma Shannon. Didn't he? She didn't answer and kept her head lowered, but I could tell that she was weeping. I turned back to Uncle Harry. Yes, he sighed. At first. At first, David asked, holding my other hand. What changed? Uncle Harry looked at me and said, your mom couldn't have any more children. When you were born, something went wrong, and they had to perform a hysterectomy. It devastated both your parents. After a while, they looked into adopting. But your father met another woman, and in less than 6 months, she was pregnant. She also wanted marriage, but he never asked Dolly for a divorce. Instead, he gave her the soup, left the house, and returned after work. She was home alone, and that bastard hit her phone. She had no way to call for help, and she died on that dining floor. I stood and moved to the patio, trying to control my tears. Nothing helped, not even when my husband held me to his chest. I was broken. I could hear everyone talking, and when Mari shouted that I needed to know all of it, I glared at her. You knew, I demanded of my cousin. For about 3 years. That's the last time. Where? Stop, Mari, Uncle Les demanded. Let your uncle finish. Go on, Harry. Harry walked to me and kissed my forehead. Shannon dear, I'm sorry we lied to you all this time, but your father is not dead. I gasped. Where is he? Prison, Grandma Shannon wailed. God help me, that's where he belongs for the rest of his life, God help me. What happened? I shouted. How was he found out? Why is he not on death row? Mari answered, he took a plea deal. Evidence was stacked against him, and his new wife turned on him, saying she didn't want to be next when he tired of her. He confessed to what he did, and they gave him 30 years. Parole hearing started after he served 15. We were supposed to go, but 3 years ago was when Gramps had the surgery for his gallbladder, so I went with Jessie to represent the family. I paced on the patio. What happened to the wife and baby? Baby's Aunt Leanna sighed. She had 2 with him before she found out. And now? Grandma Shannon answered, Sheila lives on the other side of town. We're allowed to see her 2 kids every 2 weeks, or when she needs a sitter, on the stipulation that their visits never coincide with yours. I had siblings. My heart raced as I asked, how old are they now? Leanna answered, she's 17 and he's 13. Hannah and Terrence, who was born after she found out about Ollie. She refused to name him after your father, but she did allow them both to have his last name. Wonderful, I screeched. We can all be one big happy family. I sighed to the sky. How was he found out?
Harry answered, Sheila, his wife, found a diary of Randall's and he had written everything down. After that, she unlocked his old phone, and there it all was, just waiting to be discovered. His arriving home with the soup, their light conversation about dinner and plans for the near future, and his leaving her alone after he warmed her soup, Matt said, and the anaphylactic shock she went through and her collapse. I scowled at him. You two watched the video? Both uncles tearfully nodded. Anyone else? I asked. No, Gramps sobbed. We didn't have the heart. Aunt Penny went to him while Uncle Les consoled their mother. And I can't speak for Matt, but I regret seeing it, but I felt I had to. Harry sighed. I do feel that way, Uncle Matt declared. I shook my head. And the money? Where did it come from if my father's alive? Les answered, your father was not a warehouse worker. He owned that place and several more. His lawyer dropped off a check when Sheila divorced him, which was part of the divorce agreement. Randall was to give you $500,000 and the rest went to Sheila, Shannon, Hannah, and Terrence. In return, we were never to contact Randall, Sheila, and their kids. I whirled around to him. So he kills my mother and decides who I can and cannot see? Whose fucking idea was that, if I may know? Sheila's Penny sighed. She believed you needed space from them and she didn't know how to look you in the eye. She was filled with guilt about finding that book so late and felt it would be better if we did everything possible to make you forget them. So we took care of you with the help of Shannon and Leanna, Les said. And we never touched your money. As we said, it was all placed in a trust that gave you $100,000 for college and released the rest to you at graduation. I lowered into a chair and held my head. I thought hard, but I could not remember a stepmother or siblings. I mean, I was 9 when Hannah was born, so I should have had some memory of her at least. I was 12 when Terrence was born, but by then my father was already gone and not in the way I originally thought. I cried again and ran into the house while shouting, "Party is over! Everyone leave!" Once inside, my hands fumbled while I searched, desperate for something solid to anchor me. The house was suddenly too quiet, the echo of voices from outside muffled by the closed door, but my thoughts were louder than any party guest could ever be. I pressed my back to the wall and slid down until I was sitting on the cold tile, the tears still hot on my cheeks. I tried to steady my breathing, but memories I didn't know I had kept fluttering at the edge of my mind. Faces, laughter, arguments, all just out of reach. I wrapped my arms around my knees and stared into the dim room, the truth settling over me like a heavy blanket. I fell asleep on that floor, and when I woke, David was holding me in bed. He was also still in his wedding clothes, but our feet were bare. When I looked up at him, he gave me a small smile. "Are you mad?" I asked. "Damn right I am," David scoffed. Past bullshit ruined our wedding day, and my parents were horrified about the entire situation. This was all in the news, and they remembered everything that followed. "Are they against our marriage now?" I whispered. "Course not," David insisted. "In fact, Dad was wondering when he was getting more grandchildren." I giggled, and it quickly turned into a cry. David held me until I could compose myself, but everything still felt so raw. "What should I do?" I asked, patting my face with tissues. David squeezed my shoulders. "Whatever you want, my love. We can continue with the path we discussed over the weeks, or you can confront Sheila and Randall." "Sheila? Why her?" I asked. David smiled. "'Cause despite all that, Randall did, she gave birth to your siblings and kept them from you." "Why? What was the real reason?" "Despite your father's actions, you three had a right to be in each other's lives. Don't you agree?" The thought lingered between us, heavy and unresolved. I pressed tissues to my eyes, trying to steady my breath. I don't even know what I'd say to her. What if she doesn't want to talk to me? David's voice was soft, reassuring. "You have every right to seek answers, and maybe she has questions too. But whatever you decide, I'm here. We'll face it together." His words settled something inside me, not quite peace, but a sense of possibility. For the first time in a long while, I considered that the truth might offer us all a new beginning. I gently asked, "And my father?" David sighed and whispered, "If either of my parents did that to the other, there would be nothing I'd have to say to the survivor." "Why, Davy?" "Because they made it impossible for me to talk to the other parent. There's no reason for me to say anything to them. If I did, it would be disrespectful, and that goes against my beliefs." I considered his words and nodded when he suggested that I take a long bath, insisting the water and jets would help soothe and relax me. The bubbles helped until I reached for my phone and opened my texts. The family group chat was loaded with missed messages. All were apologetic, saying they now regret that I had to hear that news during my wedding reception. Some wanted me to pursue contacting my stepmother and siblings, while others wanted me to let it all go. They knew I could never forget, but there was no need to travel that road. Grammy Shannon also texted, and it was a long one. She wanted me to see Sheila, but not my father. She had disowned him when the truth came out, and though she missed her only son, she could not forgive what he did to the beautiful soul that was my mother, and she prayed daily that my father ask forgiveness. I sat on what I wanted to do and went through the motions of teaching, bathing, cooking, eating, and just surviving. My husband tried every day to pull me from my funk, and while he did make me giggle a few times, I could not shake how I felt and how the new information concerning my parents was affecting me. Almost a month later, I woke with a clarity that I could not ignore. I wanted my father to explain to me why he took the road he chose. I needed the words from his mouth now that I had accepted that he was alive after all of these years. I told my husband my plan and no one else. He said he was going with me, but I insisted that I wanted to be alone with Randall Dean when we had our conversation. "Are you sure?" he asked with worry. I nodded. "This is something that I definitely need, Davy. Please understand." Kissed my head. "I do, my love. I'll stay in the reception area, but if you need me at any point, I'll be right there, I promise." Kissed him. "I know you will." On Tuesday morning, David and I took the day off work. My father's visiting days were on Tuesdays and Fridays, and I didn't want to wait that long. I wanted to get this over with and without anyone's opinions. I was grateful that David didn't protest my decision and supported me. Waiting for Randall Dean Ware to enter the visiting room, I pressed my palm against the cold glass of the prison visitation room, the fluorescent lights overhead flickering as if reluctant to stay awake. I had not seen my father in almost 20 years, and now he was going to be sitting across from me. He entered the room looking far older than his 51 years. He was thin, and he walked like a man who held nothing but remorse. My mind replayed the tale of Mom's last meal. The bowl of soup with peanuts mixed into it like silent threats given to her by the one person on the planet whom she believed she could trust without question. My father had always known about her peanut allergy and what could happen if Mom ingested even one. His plan was as clear as the evidence. The mistress, the child on the way, the looming threat of alimony he wanted desperately to avoid even though he had enough money to support her and me. All I could think of as I stared at him was, did he think it was worth it? My body trembled as I thought of what to say first, unsure if I wanted answers or closure or where to begin. His eyes squinted. "I don't know a Shea Weston." "Who are you?" I shook my head, then sighed at his question. He hadn't seen me since I was 9, and I looked so different now that I was 26 years old. Staring at him, I revealed I was born Shannon Ware. His eyes squinted again, then he pulled his glasses on and stared. "Baby girl," he gasped. "You look just like your beautiful mother." He reached over the glass, but I pulled away and scoffed. "I'm surprised you have anything positive to say about her." His throat cleared. "No matter what I've done, I did love her." "Then why do what you did? Why take her from her family and me?" My father looked down, tapped nervous fingers together, and said, "Just because she couldn't give me what I needed. I loved you, but I wanted more children and she couldn't give me another. I thought adoption was on the table." "What happened with that?" I asked. My father shouted, "I wanted my own, damn it. I wanted to raise children with my blood, not that of those rejected by their own parents." I inhaled. "Why? What's wrong with adoption?" He looked at me with a pained expression. "'Cause I was adopted. I felt I didn't have enough people around me with the same blood, so Ollie and I agreed to have 5 children. My parents were young, only 15 and 16 when I was born, and they didn't want me. I met them when I was 18, and though they were together with 3 more kids, they rejected me. As I stood in their den, that man gave me a check, and I was surprised to see 6 zeros and a memo saying that I'd never contact them again after the check cleared. Funniest thing was that it was already typed out with my real name, and all he had to do was date it and sign it. Your parents were millionaires by the time you were 18? He nodded. Does the name Walter Lowell mean anything to you? I shook my head. He's the lawyer who represented me. He has nothing but A-list clients, and it's been that way since he graduated from law school. And he's my biological father. I gasp. He gives me another nod. By giving me away, it cleared the path to his educational dreams. And my mother, who was a plastic surgeon. Why did he take you on as a client? Blackmail, Dad sighed. I threatened to go public with my true identity if he didn't represent me. And that would destroy his world if it were revealed that his long-tossed-away son was a murderer, especially with the victim being his own wife. My father cringed. Mama said I would never lay eyes on you again after she signed away her rights to Harold and Abigail Ware. Why are you here? I shrugged. I wanted to hear your side of the story. I've only learned of your machinations a month ago. Took me that long to decide to come here. And now that you have? I stared at the glass and mumbled I should have stayed in bed with my husband. His face contorted. When did you get married? I informed 34 days ago. I only found out about your bullshit during my reception. He nodded. I guess I'll miss walking Hannah down an aisle too. I reminded, through no one's fault but your own. You don't understand, Shannon. He offered nothing but hollow explanations, a justification that sounded more like self-preservation than regret. The safety glass between us felt thicker than ever as I realized forgiveness was not possible, at least not at that point, and the shadow of this visit would follow me long after I walked out of the prison's steel doors. I stood now thinking this was a huge mistake. And I never will, Mr. Ware. Now that we agree, I'm going to walk out of here and insist that we go back to no contact. Sorry, but I don't have $1,000,000 to keep you away. And there's nothing you can say that will impel me to ever look at your face again. I rushed out fighting tears and ran into my husband's open arms as soon as I entered the waiting area. He led us to our car and had us home in record time. I fell asleep moments after I hit the bed and didn't bother to find out who my husband was shouting at somewhere on the first floor of our home. I invited my family over for dinner and told them everything. I could not control the tears. We moved on with life and never discussed my father again. As we sat around the table in my dining room on Thanksgiving, we managed to laugh and enjoy the meal, and our conversations remained neutral and funny. After we cleaned, played games, watched a football game, and demolished the desserts, Mari, who announced her pregnancy when we all said what we were thankful for, started to feel sleepy, and everyone was surprised that it was past midnight. We packed up food and my family took their leave at 2 in the morning. I received a letter from a law firm requesting a meeting. Didn't say what about, and I wasn't their client, but they set a time for 1 week later at noon. David read the letter when he came home after basketball with Drew, Mari's husband, and several other friends. "Will you go with me?" I asked him. He smiled. "Of course. I'll settle it with Drew in the morning for both of us." With David holding my hand, we walked into the law firm and were immediately shown to a conference room that held a large black table, matching chairs, and a coffee bar that anyone would envy, and there were plants everywhere, colorful and vibrant. I frowned at the people already sitting on the other side of the table. I had no idea who they were. It was a woman older, maybe 50, and 2 teens, and the woman gasped at seeing me, then turned her head and wiped away a tear. Teen girl frowned at her and whispered something. When the woman responded, the girl turned to me and stared. The boy just tapped his impatient fingers on the table and waited silently. A tall, graying man approached us holding out his hand and said, "Mr. and Mrs. Weston, please come in. I'm J. Michael Sellers, attorney." We shook his hand and sat. Mr. Sellers cleared his throat and said, "David and Shannon Ware Weston, this is Sheila Parsons Dillard and her children Hannah and Terrence Ware." I stared at the teens. Hannah's hand went to her mouth and I breathed deeply at her reaction. Terrence stared at me with surprise and something else I couldn't recognize. I could see my father in both of them. Mr. Sellers said, "Mrs. Weston, Mrs. Dillard, young Wares, I regret to inform you all of the death of Randall Dean Ware of natural causes. Though I thought he was already deceased and I only saw him once, since learning the truth it shocked every cell in my being to learn he really was gone now." I held my chest and inhaled loudly. Hannah sighed hard and Terrence cried. Mrs. Dillard shook her head and comforted her son. "Did he suffer?" Mrs. Dillard asked. "He had a heart attack," Mr. Sellers assured gently, "and was found after the fact. It happened overnight." I nodded. "Why wasn't I told before today? And why here?" Mr. Sellers slid reading glasses on his nose and said Mr. Ware's instructions were clear concerning his final wishes. He wanted cremation and to have his ashes scattered in his mother's garden if she allowed it. If not, he wanted that decision to be made by you, where he would be interred. I've spoken to your grandmother and she declined his request. Where would you want the ashes to go? I frowned at my husband, wondering why my father chose me of all people. "Happy fucking New Year," he whispered. 11 days in, I scoffed and looked at the people across from me and frowned again. "Technically," Mr. Sellers said, steepling his fingers. "Legally, rather, you were his next of kin, as he was divorced from Mrs. Dillard. Mr. Ware wanted to honor that if his wish wasn't possible." I squeezed my husband's hand and said, "I guess Willowbrook Memorial Gardens, where his father lies." Mr. Sellers nodded. "Very well. I will call them this afternoon and settle him there. Rest assured that all provisions will be taken care of by his estate." "State?" Mrs. Dillard scoffed. "Tell me why my children and I are here, Mr. Sellers." "Mr. Ware's will reading." Mrs. Dillard frowned and said he didn't have anything left after he was sentenced. "Not true," Mr. Sellers insisted. "Mr. Ware's biological parents left him quite an inheritance." In his own will, Mr. Ware made provisions for his survivors, namely his children and ex-wife. Shall we continue? I nodded, not believing we were dragged here for this mess. Mr. Sellers could have just issued a cashier's check and a letter explaining everything. Hold on, Mrs. Dillard said. Randall was adopted? As a newborn, Mr. Sellers confirmed. Alvin and Ramona Lowell were his biological parents. Mr. Lowell died 6 years ago. Dr. Lowell passed almost 3 years later, and Randall and their other 3 children were given an equal split. I felt nothing. I never met them, and that was because they threw their son out of their lives. Mr. Sellers started reading and listed the charities and friends he left to bequest to, and they ranged between $50,000 and $100,000. The bulk of my estate, Mr. Sellers read, will be divided as follows. To my ex-wife Sheila Parsons Dillard, I leave the sum of $250,000 and a wish for her to live a better life than I gave her. To her I hold no grudges and apologize again for all I put her through. Mrs. Dillard nodded solemnly, her hair bobbing at the action. To my children Hannah Elaine and Terrence Jeffrey, where I leave the sum of $25 million each. Their inheritance will be placed in a trust and will only be touched for care and education until their 21st birthday. What? Sheila shouted. Where did he get that kind of money? I was just as surprised as she was, and I was sure my face showed it. Mr. Sellers answered. Mr. Ware's biological parents left generous bequests to him and his siblings. Let's move on. I leave my entire remaining estate, currently appreciated at $74 million, unconditionally to my eldest daughter Shannon Janine, who may access it immediately. I also sincerely apologize for past actions. For a moment the room was silent, the air heavy with disbelief and a tangle of emotions. I caught Sheila's eye. Her lips trembled, but she pressed them together as if holding back words she'd waited a lifetime to say. The numbers spun in my head, but it was the apology that seemed to hang in the space between us, raw and unresolved. Mr. Sellers cleared his throat, breaking the uneasy hush. That concludes the reading of Randall Dean Ware's will, he announced. If there are any questions or clarifications, I am available to answer them now. He set down the papers with a gentle finality, waiting as the weight of what had just been revealed settled over us all. I had nothing to say. The others looked as shell-shocked as I felt. Minutes ticked by in strained silence, each of us lost in our private storms of thought. Finally, Terrence broke the quiet with a shaky laugh, trying to lighten the mood but failing. Well, I guess Dad liked grand gestures. His voice cracked on the last word, and he looked down, twisting his hands in his lap. Too bad one of them was. Hannah folded her arms, her face unreadable. I don't want the money, she said quietly, almost to herself. I just wanted. He was not a good man, and no amount of money will change my mind on that. Her words trailed off unfinished, but the ache they left behind was clear. No one moved to speak after that. The weight of the inheritance and of old wounds lingered in the room like a shadow long after Mr. Sellers sat silently, waiting. Don't either of you turn away from that blessing, Sheila sighed. You deserve it. You all deserve it and more. Your father was not there for either of you, and he caused. You'll need to survive this world, and now you can without worries about where your next meal will come from and in a warm home. I nodded, agreeing. You have less than 4 years to decide on the bulk of the inheritance, and I have already withdrawn enough for you to attend any college of your choosing, Mr. Sellers said. Miss Ware, I advise you to consider the future, and if you decide you truly want no part of the inheritance, then let me know and we will figure out how to disperse it. Your father has retained my law firm for the rest of your life, so if I'm not available, someone in the firm will make sure everything will be handled to your satisfaction. Hannah blinked, then said, I will think about it, but in the meantime, I only want one thing from my father. Mr. Sellers nodded and said, Go on, Miss Ware. A relationship with his other daughter, Hannah whispered. Please. Hannah, Sheila called, her green eyes flashing. I do too, Terrence insisted. I ignored their mother's glare and said, We can start with lunch and get to know the basics. How does that sound? I am their mother, Sheila shouted. And both are underage. They will not have a relationship with that woman until I say so. Terrence turned to his mother. Yeah, but if you stand in our way, these will be the last words you hear from my mouth. Terrence turned to me. We've known about you for years thanks to Grammy. I've been interested in knowing you since learning you shared her name. Dad is the fault in all this and not you. He turned back to his mother. I don't even know her outside of what Grammy has told us, but I love my oldest sister. Hannah sighed and said, Mom, I love you, but I need her too. I want her in our lives. I only have to wait 8 months, but if you continue keeping us from Shannon, I'll stop talking to you too, and there won't be anything you can say or do to make me say hi to you. Let it all go and let me know my sister. Terrence insisted. We share blood with her. Sheila rolled her eyes. She is not welcome in my home. Don't ever ask. Fine with me, I said. I have my own. David insisted. Hannah and Terrence will always be welcome there. Smiling, I kissed him. If that's all, Mr. Sellers, I'd like to go have lunch with my brother and sister. Mr. Sellers explained this and that about the inheritance, had me look over several things before signing, and 30 minutes later David, Hannah, Terrence and I left the law firm and walked slowly to the nearest restaurant. It was Italian, and Terrence excitedly said that was his favorite food. David kissed my cheek and said he'd let us have this lunch alone, promising he'd be close and ready to drive me home after we were done. We lingered over pasta and laughter, trading stories and uncovering memories that felt both new and familiar. Hannah twirled her fork absent-mindedly, glancing from Terrence to me, her eyes shining with the kind of hope that only comes from finding pieces of yourself you didn't know were missing. Terrence recounted tales from their childhood, sometimes pausing to ask about mine, and we marveled at the similarities and differences in our lives. There were moments of awkward silence, but even those felt comfortable, as if we were all learning to breathe together for the first time. By the time the waiter cleared the last plate, our connection felt stronger, and I sensed that despite everything, this was the start of something lasting. A year later, when I became pregnant, Hannah was determined to throw me a baby shower, while Terrence eagerly shared the news with everyone that he was going to be an uncle. He showed me so much care, just as much as David did. The biggest surprise through all of it was that Sheila sent a gift, but she didn't attend the party. Shortly before our son was born, Hannah and Terrence practically moved in with us, decorating, cooking, and cleaning everything in the house. I found it funny that Terrence would insist that visitors remove their shoes and sanitize their hands, then said to expect the same when the baby came home. His proactiveness was appreciated. Hannah went to culinary school and met a man she fell for quickly. They married a month after her 23rd birthday, and Mr. Sellers was satisfied with her prenup. Together, they opened a Mexican/American fusion restaurant that David and I invested in with Terrence, who by that time was applying to med school. He wanted to be a surgeon. David Jr. looked adorable as the ring bearer, and Mari's daughter Janie was the flower girl. Mari and I were both pregnant again, her third, my second, and were exhausted at the end of the celebration. I didn't cut Grammy Shannon out of my life. She mattered to me as much as Grandma Abigail. Both women had a big impact on who I became, even though I started off selfish. David changed my perspective, but both of my grandmothers kept me grounded. I gave each of the original 22 relatives $1 million, and they joked I never needed to get them gifts again. My grandfather called it a new Cole family rule. Years passed, and our family grew in ways that felt miraculous. Terrence graduated from medical school with honors, eventually becoming the surgeon he always dreamed of, and Hannah's restaurant blossomed like her own family into a neighborhood staple thanks to her and her husband's delicious dishes, relaxing atmosphere, and caring staff. On holidays, the old jokes about never needing gifts resurfaced, but the warmth in our gatherings spoke louder than any present could. Grammy Shannon and Grandma Abigail, surrounded by grandchildren and great-grandchildren, would sometimes catch my eye and smile knowingly. Their wisdom and love anchored us just as they always had. It wasn't the inheritance that defined our happiness, but the connections we forged and the memories we cherished. One afternoon, David and I watched our 4 children play in the backyard, laughter echoing through the house, and expressed how grateful we were for the life we had built together. In the end, our story was one of second chances and lasting bonds, proof that family, whether found or inherited, is the greatest gift of all. And sometimes change was good, especially when it's your own and for the better.